The first to vanish was Sister Agnes O'Connor, a girl of 23 with hair like spun gold and a spirit unbroken by the harsh Wisconsin winters. She had come from Galway, leaving behind a widowed mother and 3 younger brothers. In her letters home, letters that would later be found hidden beneath floorboards, never sent, she spoke of homesickness, of the brutal cold, of the rawness in her hands from endless washing, but also of faith, of hope, of the belief that she served a higher purpose. But by April 1855, that hope was snuffed out like a candle under Mother Catherine's thumb. It began with isolation. Small infractions, a laugh during recreation, a tear shed during prayer, became cause for penance. Kneeling on dried peas until blood stained her habit, scrubbing the chapel stones with bare, cracked hands. Nights spent in cold corridors with no blanket, as the wind howled through the cracks in the ancient stone. The other sisters watched in silence, terror rooting them to obedience. And then, one dawn, she was gone. Mother Catherine announced it with the cold formality of a business transaction. Sister Agnes has been reassigned, she said at breakfast, her pale eyes sweeping the table, daring anyone to challenge her. She departed before matins, called to serve at a mission in Minnesota. The words hung heavy in the air. Sister Bernadette opened her mouth to protest. She and Agnes had shared a dormitory cot wall, had whispered their hopes and fears in the dark. But one look from Mother Catherine silenced her. No goodbyes, no packed trunk, no final letter home, just absence, like a tooth pulled from the jaw, sudden and aching. The other sisters tried to believe the explanation. They tried to pray away their unease. But that night, when Sister Mary Collins crept to the dormitory cloakroom, she found Agnes's heavy winter cloak still hanging on its peg. After Sister Agnes's disappearance, the rhythm of life at St. Mary's grew tighter, harsher. The daily prayers felt like a cage closing around the minds of the remaining sisters. Mother Catherine's voice grew sharper, her demands more severe. And always there was Sister Margaret, thin, sharp-eyed, the keeper of the infirmary and its secrets. Together they moved like twin blades, carving away defiance, trimming the spirit of any nun who dared think for herself. The second to vanish was Sister Bernadette Walsh. It was July, a hot, airless night when the woods outside seemed to press against the convent walls, heavy with the scent of pine and decay. Bernadette was the heart of the younger nuns, kind, musical, quick to soothe a crying orphan or comfort a homesick novice. Her voice had filled the chapel with hymns so pure even the most cynical of neighbors would pause to listen when the windows stood open. That night, no hymn came. Morning prayers found her place empty, and once again, Mother Catherine offered the same brittle explanation, a reassignment, a calling to Chicago, no farewell, no witness to her departure, and the cloak still hanging untouched. But now something shifted. Fear rippled through the convent like a plague. The sisters stopped speaking during recreation. Eyes stayed downcast, hands trembled as they worked the gardens, the laundry, the infirmary. Sister Teresa Donovan, strong of will and born of Irish earth, dared whisper to Sister Mary Collins in the garden one day, "Do you not see? They are taking us one by one." "But where?" Mary said nothing. Her eyes flicked nervously to the infirmary windows, where Sister Margaret stood watching, always watching. And behind those windows, behind that thin smile of Sister Margaret's, was the room no one spoke of, the locked chamber where no novice entered and from which no sound ever came. By autumn, the local community began to notice. Farmers who delivered milk or eggs to the convent's back door whispered of seeing fewer faces at the windows. Mothers who brought their sick children to Sister Margaret's infirmary spoke of the nuns' pale, hollow-eyed stares, the nervous glances exchanged like silent confessions. And the children, the orphans once taught with tenderness by Sister Elizabeth, now shuffled through their lessons in tense silence, watched by nuns who seemed brittle as frost-bitten branches. Mother Catherine, however, appeared undisturbed. On the contrary, her control grew absolute. The nuns' once weekly letters to families in Ireland or Boston were now dictated, censored, or never sent at all. Every word was read, every slip of the tongue noted. every thought policed. And those who dared question the disappearances, those who asked where Sister Agnes or Bernardet had gone, found themselves subjected to public humiliations during meals, forced penances that left bruises, and nights spent locked alone in the freezing chapel. Rumors outside the convent began to swirl. Elijah Hoffman, the Lutheran elder, swore he'd seen Mother Catherine in the woods past midnight, her habit flaring like a dark flame in the moonlight, speaking softly into the darkness as if to something that answered back. Children of local settlers told stories of eyes gleaming from the tree line, of shadows that moved against the wind, of soft chanting carried on fog rolling in from Lake Michigan. But it was the letters, smuggled out by orphans brave or desperate enough to slip them to passing travelers, that carried the first real alarm. One, found decades later in the diary of a Milwaukee shopkeeper, read only, "Please tell my family I did not leave. I did not go willingly. Mother Catherine knows. Pray for us." Yet the bishop in Milwaukee, the man who should have acted, turned. Behind the locked doors of St. Mary's, rituals began to change. Morning prayers grew longer, more fevered, laced with cryptic Latin phrases that few of the younger nuns recognized. Sister Margaret began administering strange tonics under the guise of herbal remedies, bitter, foul-tasting drafts that left some sisters feverish, others oddly numb. Mother Catherine insisted the tonics were for spiritual purification, but those who drank often awoke with no memory of the previous night, bruises on their wrists, strange symbols drawn in chalk around their beds. The orphanage changed too. The children, once given simple Bible lessons, now repeated chants they did not understand. Their playtime was replaced by silent drills, their laughter smothered into quiet obedience. Sister Elizabeth, once the convent's gentle heart, seemed transformed. Her smile vanished. Her hands, once so comforting, trembled constantly. Her eyes darted like those of a cornered animal, yet she said nothing, as if whatever power ruled the convent had hollowed her out from the inside. One evening, Sister Teresa Donovan, the only nun left willing to speak openly, confronted Mother Catherine in the chapel. "Where are they?" she demanded, her voice echoing off the cold stone. "What have you done with Sister Agnes, Bernardet, Catherine, Josephine?" The question hung in the still air. The candles flickered as if caught in a sudden, breathless gust. Mother Catherine stepped forward, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "They answered God's call," she said softly, almost tenderly. Then her voice hardened like iron. "Do you doubt His will?" Teresa never answered. That night her bed lay empty comme matins. The next morning Mother Catherine's voice rang through the refectory. "Sister Teresa has gone where faith is needed most." And just like that, the last voice of dissent fell silent, and the remaining nuns slipped fully into Mother Catherine's grip. Outside St. Mary's, the winter of 1856 was the coldest in memory. Wolves prowled the forest edges, their howls piercing the long nights. Snowdrifts swallowed roads, isolating farms. The convent, with its tall stone walls, looked like a fortress against the storm, but inside it was a prison of terror. Each day, fewer nuns walked the halls. Each night, the chapel echoed with the desperate prayers of those who remained. Mother Catherine's authority became absolute. No meal was eaten without her blessing. No word was spoken without her approval. Sister Margaret's infirmary became a place of whispered rumors, of nuns taken inside for treatment, who were never seen again. Of the dark wooden cabinet near the rear wall, always locked, from which strange metallic smells leaked on nights when screams rose under the cover of the blizzard. Meanwhile, comma letters from distant families poured into the Milwaukee diocese, begging for news of missing daughters. Every one of them was answered with short, polite replies, stamped with the diocesan seal. Letters later found to be written by the same hand, each phrase carefully composed to soothe suspicion without offering a single verifiable fact. And always the same refrain: "Your daughter serves God faithfully in a distant mission." The orphans, too, began to disappear. Some were said to have been adopted by wealthy benefactors who never arrived to collect them. Others simply vanished overnight. The surviving children learned quickly, do not speak of the missing, do not question the adults, do not cry. Their silence bought them a few more days, perhaps weeks, of safety. And through it all, the bell kept tolling. Every morning, every night, its mournful clang resounded across the frozen countryside, a sound that once promised devotion, now warped into an ominous reminder that something unspeakable ruled St. Mary's Convent. The first outsider to sense the horror brewing at St. Mary's was Father Thomas McBride, a young priest dispatched by the Milwaukee Diocese to conduct a routine inspection in the spring of 1857. He arrived to find the convent eerily quiet, its halls echoing with a sterile orderliness that felt more like an asylum than a house of faith. Mother Catherine greeted him with a smile that never reached her eyes, her voice warm yet cold, her words polished yet empty. As Father McBride walked the halls, he noted the missing faces. He recognized names from the diocese records, nuns who should have been present but were nowhere to be found. When he asked about them, Mother Catherine's tone turned sharp. "They are serving elsewhere," she said. "We are blessed to have sent them where they were most needed." But McBride was not a fool. That night he slipped from his guest room and explored the convent by moonlight. He found locked doors, dark stains on the infirmary floor, and scraps of torn veils and rosaries hidden in the furnace ash. In a narrow crawl space behind the chapel, he discovered a pile of children's toys, dolls, wooden animals, a ragged stuffed rabbit, covered in dust and cobwebs. Their owners, he realized with dawning horror, were gone. When he confronted Mother Catherine at dawn, she listened calmly, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "Father," she whispered, "if you love your church, you will not speak of what you think you've seen. Some truths are too dangerous, even for men of God." Father McBride fled St. Mary's that afternoon. Within days, he sent a report to the bishop, but the document was intercepted, never filed, never read. And Father McBride himself, assigned to a remote parish near the Minnesota border, died 6 months later in a fire that consumed his rectory. His last words, according to a terrified altar boy who survived, were, "They are coming." With Father McBride gone, St. Mary's entered a period of unchallenged darkness. Mother Catherine tightened her grip further, forbidding any communication with the outside world except through letters she personally approved. The orphanage officially closed due to illness, but no graves were dug, and no bodies were seen carried out. Sister Margaret's infirmary became the final destination for any who questioned, disobeyed, or simply looked too closely at the shadows moving in the corners of the convent's halls. The local community, now suspicious but paralyzed by distance and winter's wrath, gossiped about the tolling bell and the pale figures glimpsed through fogged windows. But none dared approach. Protestants still feared the convent's foreign rites, while Catholics trusted the bishop's reassurances that all was well at St. Mary's. Yet, in the taverns of nearby settlements, stories began to circulate of travelers who heard chanting in the woods, chanting not in Latin, but in guttural, ancient sounds that twisted the stomach and chilled the spine. Meanwhile, the nuns who remained were shadows of their former selves. Sister Mary Collins, once bright and quick-witted, moved with a hollow gaze, her hands trembling so violently she could no longer light the chapel candles. Sister Elizabeth, now a ghost of her maternal self, avoided eye contact with everyone, including the orphans who once clung to her skirts. Sister Margaret's thin smile grew sharper, her voice colder, and at night the faint scent of burning herbs and blood drifted from the infirmary, seeping through the convent like a poison. Mother Catherine began conducting midnight gatherings in the locked chapel, gatherings that stretched until dawn. Neighbors who dared walk near the convent at night reported seeing dark-robed figures illuminated by red candlelight through the stained glass windows, moving. It was during one of those midnight gatherings that the final transformation of Mother Catherine became undeniable. On a night when the wind screamed through the pines like a chorus of lost souls, The remaining nuns were ordered to kneel in a circle around the chapel's altar. The red candles flickered wildly, throwing grotesque shapes across the walls. Mother Catherine stepped into the center, her pale eyes gleaming with an unnatural light, her voice low and guttural as she began a chant that no one recognized, a chant that pulsed with something older than the church, older than the words carved into any Bible dot. As the chant built, Sister Margaret stepped forward with a small silver bowl filled with a dark liquid that smelled of copper and rot. She dipped a brush made from human hair into the bowl and began marking each kneeling nun's forehead with a crude symbol, an inverted cross twisted with serpentine curves. Some nuns whimpered. Others fell into silent, petrified shock, but none dared move dot. When the markings were complete, Mother Catherine raised her hands and declared in a voice not entirely her own, "Tonight, you are reborn in devotion beyond faith. Tonight, you learn what it means to serve a higher hunger." The candles extinguished all at once, as if snuffed by an unseen breath, plunging the chapel into darkness broken only by the ragged breathing of the terrified sisters. That night, the nuns heard the convent's heavy doors creak open, the sound of something large, far too large to be human, dragging itself through the halls. A stench of earth and decay spread through the air. When morning came, Sister Mary Collins' bed was empty. Her few possessions, including the small wooden rosary she clutched every night, remained untouched. And for the first time, not even Mother Catherine bothered to offer an explanation. Outside, Dawn broke over Lake Michigan with a red sky that made the frozen water look like a sea of blood. By early 1858, the convent was a shell of its former self. The remaining nuns lived in a haze of terror and exhaustion. Nights brought whispers of footsteps on the roof, scratching at the windows, low voices humming in languages they could not place. The once orderly days now blurred together, prayers and punishments indistinguishable, penance doled out in brutal, arbitrary fashion. Mother Catherine's authority grew monstrous. She no longer pretended to be a shepherd guiding her flock. She became the wolf. Her sermons twisted scripture into threats. "Blessed are the obedient, for they shall escape the devourer." Each homily hammered the message deeper, that the outside world was corrupt, that only inside St. Mary's walls could salvation, or survival, be found, and that obedience to her was obedience to God himself. Meanwhile, Sister Margaret's infirmary turned from sanctuary to slaughterhouse. The nuns heard the cries in the night, brief, muffled, always cut short. The next day, the scent of lye and blood lingered in the halls, and another bed lay empty. Sister Elizabeth was seen scrubbing the infirmary floors at dawn, her habit soaked with pink water, her face blank as a doll's. And though the orphanage was officially closed, the sounds of children's sobs sometimes drifted from the locked east wing, only to stop abruptly when footsteps approached. Outside, the forest seemed to recoil from the convent. Deer paths once used by hunters grew over, and local men reported animals refusing to go near the convent walls. Even the wolves kept their distance, howls fading when they approached the black outline of the convent, rising like a tombstone against the sky. Yet the bishop remained silent. The diocese's coffers swelled with donations from distant parishes, celebrating the success of St. Mary's mission. And so the darkness thickened, unnoticed or willfully ignored. It was the journal of Sister Teresa Donovan, discovered a century later during renovations, that offered the clearest glimpse into the final months of St. Mary's descent. Written in hurried, terrified script on scraps of linen and hidden between the walls, it recounted how each midnight ritual grew stranger, more violent, until prayers were replaced with frenzied chanting that left the sisters weeping in exhaustion. She described the night they were made to drink from a black chalice that smelled of rust, after which many fell sick for days, plagued by fever dreams of dark, clawed shapes crawling from the forest into the convent halls. Her final entries revealed a pattern. Mother Catherine selected nuns who showed kindness or doubt, those who hesitated when ordered to strike a penitent, those who still reached for the children in comfort. These nuns would soon vanish. Sister Teresa realized this was no divine calling. It was a culling of conscience, a purge of compassion to forge a community of perfect, unquestioning obedience. She wrote of Sister Margaret's herbs, how they no longer soothed but stupefied, inducing strange waking nightmares. Of Sister Elizabeth's eyes, once warm, now black and glassy, fixed on an unseen horizon, and of the chapel, where strange symbols were carved deeper each night into the stone floor, symbols that bled dark sap, as if the building itself wept. But her last entry chilled the blood of the historians who found it. Written in a shaking hand, it read simply, "Tonight she says we shall meet the one who grants her power. Tonight she says we shall be unmade and remade in his shadow. I fear if this page is found, we are already lost." The journal ended there. No signature, no final prayer, only silence. A silence that seemed to echo from the past, hollow and eternal. That final night, according to scattered fragments of testimony and the mute witness of the convent walls themselves, began with the tolling of the chapel bell at midnight, a sound so deep and resonant it was said to shake frost from the pine branches outside. Every remaining nun was ordered to the chapel, where red candles already burned, casting shifting shadows that danced like demons across the carved stone. Mother Catherine stood at the altar, a book in her hands bound in cracked leather that no one had ever seen before. She read aloud words so guttural they seemed to scrape the walls themselves, words that twisted the air heavy and stale. Sister Margaret moved among the kneeling sisters, pressing something bitter and sharp onto their tongues, a black wafer that filled their mouths with the taste of iron and rot. As the chanting rose, so too did a smell, earth freshly turned, moss, and something like burning hair. The air thickened until every breath felt like inhaling tar. Sister Elizabeth began sobbing uncontrollably, but Mother Catherine only smiled, a grim curve of pale lips that bore no warmth or humanity. Then the floor itself seemed to vibrate. A deep, wet thump echoed through the chapel, once, twice, 3 times, as if something impossibly massive was shifting below the foundation stones. The candles flickered violently, some extinguishing outright. A freezing gust swept through the room despite sealed doors and shuttered windows. Several nuns fainted, their bodies crumpling onto the cold stone. Those who remained conscious saw Mother Catherine raise her arms and cry out in a voice no longer hers, "Come forth, O keeper of silence, feed upon our devotion." A blackness deeper than shadow pooled around her feet, creeping outward like ink across water. And in that darkness, a shape began to rise, a thing so foreign to the mind that the sisters' eyes, when neighbors finally dared approach days later, they found the convent door swinging gently in the cold wind. Snow had drifted into the entry hall, blanketing the stone floor in pristine white that only made the red stains more vivid. The entire building stood silent, no chants, no footsteps, no whispers. The chapel, the dormitories, the infirmary, all empty abandoned pots of thin gruel still sat on the kitchen stove, long since cooled to a gray film. In the dormitories, beds were rumpled but vacant, habits folded neatly at their foot. The orphanage wing bore tiny handprints on frosted windows, but not a single child could be found. Even the livestock in the convent's small barn stood dead-eyed, unfed, ribs showing through dirty hides. It was as if life had been plucked from the building all at once. But the most disturbing discovery came in the chapel. There, in the center aisle, the stone floor bore a blackened stain that no scrubbing could remove, a sprawling, misshapen symbol etched deep into the limestone, slick with a residue that never dried. The bishop's investigators would later report feeling ill the longer they looked at it, some collapsing outright when their eyes lingered too long. Of Mother Catherine, Sister Margaret, Sister Elizabeth, or any of the surviving nuns and children, there was no sign, no bodies, no footprints leading away into the snow. Just emptiness. The diocese quietly sealed the convent. Officials declared it uninhabitable due to structural instability. No funeral rites were offered, no requiem masses sung. In official ledgers, the missing nuns were marked as transferred or lost in inclement weather, the orphans as adopted by benefactors. St. Mary's itself was left to rot, becoming a place no one dared enter, a place spoken of only in hushed tones. Over the decades, the forest began to reclaim St. Mary's. Vines crept over limestone walls. The bell tower leaned until it collapsed in a storm, scattering jagged stones into the courtyard. Locals spoke of shapes moving behind broken windows at night, of a low hum rising from the earth beneath the ruins. Whenever the moon turned red, children dared each other to approach the gates on Halloween. Hunters avoided the woods nearby, reporting rifles jamming, compasses spinning, or the sudden crushing sense of being watched. One logger claimed to see a procession of black-robed women drifting silently between the pines, eyes pale and unblinking, faces frozen in expressions of infinite sorrow. Yet whenever brave souls attempted to demolish the remaining structure, their efforts ended in disaster. Machinery malfunctioned, workers suffered freak accidents, and fires mysteriously erupted. Eventually, all plans to raise St. Mary's were abandoned. The diocese fenced off the land, citing historical preservation, but in truth wanting only to keep the past buried. But rumors persisted. People spoke of a deep, cold voice heard near the ruins on foggy nights, whispering in a language older than any known faith, of dreams shared by strangers across towns, dreams of a woman with pale eyes who offered blessings that curdled to curses by morning. Even today, the place is avoided by all but the desperate or the damned, and those who linger too long by the broken gates report seeing, just beyond the tree line, a flicker of red candlelight in the shadows, and hearing, faint but unmistakable, the tolling of a bell. Though the convent was abandoned, its story was far from buried. In 1921, a team of archivists cataloging diocesan records uncovered a sealed box labeled simply St. Mary's. Inside lay crumbling letters, ledgers, and a handful of brittle pages from Sister Teresa's journal, documents so disturbing that the church ordered them resealed immediately. But one archivist, Father James Mallory, kept copies. His private letters, published decades later, revealed what he had read. Father Mallory described references to rituals older than Christianity, invocations of a keeper of silence, and confessions of blood rites meant to awaken something slumbering beneath the earth. The letters from Mother Catherine grew increasingly erratic, shifting from prayers to praises of a dark power she called the True Shepherd. She wrote of dreams in which she stood on the shores of a lake blacker than midnight, offering the hearts of her sisters as gifts to a towering figure cloaked in shifting shadows. Father Mallory's letters told of his own descent into paranoia after reading these texts. He spoke of hearing whispers at night, of seeing a pale woman standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes luminous and unblinking. His final letter, sent to a fellow priest, ended abruptly with a single line: "I have seen the keeper. Pray for my soul." He was found dead in his study 3 days later. His heart stopped as if from terror. The diocese quickly seized and sealed his copies. Yet rumors spread among the clergy. Some whispered the convent had uncovered not just corruption, but a forgotten covenant, a pact sealed in blood, binding St. Mary's to something beneath Lake Michigan, something that fed on faith twisted into fear. For years afterward, priests assigned to the surrounding parishes reported spikes in unexplained suicides, families disappearing into the woods, and dreams of chanting DRI. In the 1950s, urban legends about St. Mary's exploded. Local newspapers ran sensational stories of teenagers disappearing after entering the ruins, of satanic symbols painted on cracked walls, of cults gathering by moonlight to resurrect the convent's dark rites. While some reports were hoaxes or exaggerations, others hinted at more chilling truths. A group of college students, investigating the site in 1957, captured photos of symbols etched deep into the stone floor of the collapsed chapel. Experts identified these as sigils resembling those found in pre-Christian ritual sites across Northern Europe, symbols never recorded in any Catholic tradition. These symbols, combined with journal fragments describing nightly ceremonies, suggested Mother Catherine's power had roots far older than the Church. By the 1960s, locals referred to the ruins only as the Silent Place. Hunters claimed to hear a bell tolling softly beneath the snow during winter dawns. Campers near the lake swore they glimpsed nuns in black habits, moving silently along the shore, their footprints vanishing before they reached the water's edge. Priests called to bless the site reported nausea and blackouts. One priest's final journal entry before resigning described a dream in which he stood in the convent's ruined chapel as an endless procession of nuns filed past, each whispering a single word he could never remember upon waking, only that it filled him with unspeakable dread. As urban legends and true horrors intertwined, the boundary between myth and reality dissolved, leaving only the chilling certainty that something had been awakened at St. Mary's, and it would never fully sleep again. In the 1980s, an investigative journalist named Rachel Havers set out to expose the convent's true story, believing it was nothing more than a tale of abuse covered up by a powerful institution. She spent weeks interviewing descendants of those who had lived near St. Mary's, reviewing diaries, letters, and newspaper clippings hidden in attics. But as her research deepened, Rachel's tone shifted from skeptical to frightened. She documented patterns of disappearances in the area stretching back, not just to the convent's time, but centuries before. Stories of women vanishing near Lake Michigan, of children pulled screaming into the woods, of a pale one seen walking along the shoreline whenever the moon was dark. Rachel's final recordings were never broadcast. Her notes end with a transcript of a frantic phone call to her editor. It's not a ghost story. It's not just a cult. It's a pact. Older than this country. Older than the Church. They made it real. They woke it up. Her car was found at the convent's gates 2 days later. Empty, driver's door wide open. She was never seen again. Her disappearance reignited public fascination. Paranormal investigators swarmed the ruins, yet many fled mid-investigation, driven away by sudden panic attacks, hallucinations of dark-robed figures, or the overwhelming smell of rotting earth. Equipment failed inexplicably, cameras captured only static, and those who spent the night reported vivid, identical dreams, standing in the ruined chapel as the tolling bell called something up from the frozen lake. In the early 2000s, new interest in the convent arose among occult researchers who believed St. Mary's wasn't merely a site of corruption, but a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds had been thinned or torn. Groups from as far as Europe and South America came to perform rituals they claimed would heal the land. But each attempt ended the same way. Participants fled in terror, abandoning supplies, some suffering complete memory loss of the hours spent inside the convent's crumbling walls. A researcher from Prague recorded what he described as a harmonic resonance within the ruined chapel, a low-frequency hum he captured on specialized audio equipment. Analysis revealed patterns resembling human speech, but no language experts could decode them. He noted that the tone changed depending on the time of night, intensifying between midnight and 3 a.m., what folklore calls the witching hour. Another team discovered the stone floor of the chapel had shifted over the decades, revealing a narrow spiral staircase leading to a subterranean chamber. There they found walls, scorched black as if by ancient fires, and carvings depicting serpentine creatures coiled around weeping figures in habits. But before they could document everything, 2 team members collapsed, screaming, blood streaming from their noses. The team retreated, sealing the staircase with concrete, but not before one whispered to a camera in a panicked voice, "It's still down there." Stories of these failed exorcisms and explorations only fueled the site's legend, attracting thrill-seekers, cultists, and occult tourists, many of whom disappeared without a trace. Locals resumed old warnings, posting signs miles from the ruins. "Turn back. The silent place claims all." And yet, the bell still tolls in the dead of night. Hunters, hikers, and lost motorists report hearing it. Always faint, always distant, as if calling them deeper into the woods, and into something that has waited patiently in darkness for over a century. By 2015, urban explorers with high-tech cameras dared to document the silent place for YouTube, hoping for viral fame. Many entered, few emerged. Those who did shared videos showing bizarre phenomena, crosses inverting by themselves, figures flitting behind collapsed walls, and shadowy shapes captured in frames that flickered with digital distortion. Some footage included audio of a voice, a woman's, icy and calm, repeating phrases like, "The shepherd waits," or "The silence feeds." One video streamed live to thousands before ending abruptly with a guttural roar and the sound of the camera hitting stone. The explorer was found days later, wandering a highway miles away, unable to speak, eyes wide with unblinking terror. Locals reported lights moving through the forest at night. Not flashlights, but orbs of dull red that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Some described a smell drifting into town on certain winds, a scent of damp earth and rotting lilies that made dogs whimper and children wake, screaming. Despite this, the legend's power grew. Millions watched the videos, debated theories of mass hysteria, ancient pagan sites, or interdimensional rifts. Yet the deeper they delved, the more consistent the reports became. The same bell tolling, the same pale woman glimpsed at the edge of the woods, the same sense of something vast and hungry lingering beneath the earth. All signs pointed to a truth far older than a lost convent. That the hunger awakened at St. Mary's never ended and never would, as long as anyone remembered its name. The church, desperate to quash the spreading obsession, attempted to purchase the land from private owners who had inherited it through convoluted lines of inheritance. Negotiations failed repeatedly. Buyers backed out after visiting the site, citing persistent nightmares and a sense of being watched. One bishop who championed the purchase resigned after spending a single night near the ruins, later institutionalized for what doctors called violent religious delirium. Records obtained by investigative journalists showed decades of attempts by multiple dioceses to quietly erase the convent's existence from maps, archives, and registries. Yet each effort ended in tragedy. Archivists dying in car accidents, fires consuming records, or unexpected heart attacks among those who handled the convent's files. A leaked Vatican memo from 2017 revealed the church now considered St. Mary's a site of spiritual contamination and recommended complete isolation. It cautioned clergy to never speak the name aloud and to deny all knowledge should inquiries arise. The memo included chilling words. The pact endures. The keeper's hunger is sated only through silence. Break it, and the price must be paid. Despite these warnings, the fascination continues to grow, spreading across forums, podcasts, and dark web communities. And each new retelling feeds the keeper, its name whispered across the world, carrying the echo of St. Mary's darkness into countless minds. Those who study the psychology of mass fear call St. Mary's a perfect storm, a site soaked in centuries of secrecy, tragedy, and whispered blasphemies, fertile ground for obsession. But there's something more, a consistency to accounts that defies coincidence. Across generations, languages, and cultures, the same pale woman appears, the same tolling bell sounds, the same sense of being watched festers like an open wound in the mind. Neurologists who examined survivors of extended stays near the ruins found patterns in their brain scans resembling those who suffer from shared delusions, but with an anomaly, identical neural signatures, almost like a psychic fingerprint. One researcher wrote, "It's as if the place imprints itself on visitors, rewriting them with the same code of dread." Meanwhile, local law enforcement quietly maintains files of recent disappearances, hikers, vagrants, or the occasional true crime enthusiast who wandered too close. Their belongings, backpacks, phones, half-eaten meals, are often found neatly arranged at the gates of the convent. Dogs sent to track them whimper and refuse to cross the threshold. Those few who return are irrevocably changed. They speak of dreams they cannot wake from, of chanting that follows them home, of eyes in mirrors, watching from behind their own reflection. Some take their own lives, leaving behind cryptic notes with phrases like, "The silence is inside me now," or "The bell won't stop." To authorities, these are tragedies. To believers, they are proof that the keeper's hunger is eternal, that every mention, every investigation, every terrified gaze pulled toward the silent place strengthens what slumbers there. And in an age where information spreads instantly, its reach has never been greater. And so the legend grows, not in dusty books or whispered campfire tales alone, but through the endless churn of modern media. Viral videos, clickbait headlines, haunted podcast specials, all feeding a story that has slipped free of its grave, spreading across continents like a plague of shadow. Experts note how certain stories have a life of their own, evolving to meet the fears of each generation. For the Victorians, it was the wrath of a vengeful god. For the Cold War era, secret experiments gone wrong. But St. Mary's defies this evolution, remaining starkly the same. Pale eyes in the dark, a bell tolling where none should sound, and a hunger that grows with each telling. This persistence is what terrifies folklorists. They call it a fixed myth, a tale that does not change because it does not need to. It is not a reflection of our fears. It is the cause of them. A root, not a branch. Something older than our words, older than the church that tried to control it, older even than the forests that now choke its crumbling stones. In interviews, locals speak with resigned certainty. It's always been there, they say. Before the nuns, before the settlers, before the first canoes crossed the lake, it calls, it waits. And every retelling, every curious soul drawn to the ruins, every sleepless night spent reading these words, they are steps toward the keeper, offerings of attention to feed what was woken beneath St. Mary's Convent. So why does this story still matter? Why does the silence at St. Mary's continue to pull men's minds like a black star, generation after generation? The truth is that it strikes at something primal. The fear that beneath our rituals, our beliefs, and our certainties, there is only a cold, indifferent darkness, a darkness older than any faith, stronger than any dogma, a darkness that cannot be exorcised because it never pretended to be evil. It simply is. This is why even hardened skeptics report unease reading about St. Mary's late at night. Why men with no faith find themselves crossing themselves unconsciously when the bell tolls in their dreams. Why no matter how many times someone tries to laugh off the legend, a small voice inside wonders, what if it's true? And perhaps, more disturbingly, what if it's not just true in that ruined chapel, but everywhere? A thinness in the fabric of reality that can open anywhere rituals, grief, or unchecked power call it forth. Because the story of St. Mary's isn't just one of misguided faith or secret sins. It's the story of how our need for meaning, control, and absolution can awaken something that thrives on our desperation. Look at the pattern. Secrecy breeding rot, authority silencing questions, and a community's collective refusal to see what festers in the shadows. It is a perfect mirror of every dark chapter in human history. That is the most dangerous truth of St. Mary's. Not the keeper beneath the floor, but what the keeper teaches. That the greatest evil grows not in monsters, but in the silence we keep to avoid facing them. So I ask you now, have you felt the quiet at the edges of your own life? The hush in empty rooms that feels too heavy? The stillness in your heart that waits for a sound you can't quite name? If you hear that bell tolling in your dreams tonight, don't dismiss it. Don't comfort yourself with logic or tell yourself it's just a story. Know that you have been marked, not with a curse, but with an invitation to awareness. Remember, legends survive not because they are old, but because they are true enough to cut. St. Mary's is a scar on the land and on the soul of every man who dares to face what it represents. The price of silence, the hunger of hidden power, and the darkness that grows when we refuse to look. Before you go, I need you to do something to seal this knowledge inside you, and to keep this story alive, spreading its seed into minds hungry for forbidden truths. In the comments below, write the phrase, "The bell still tolls," twice. This is no empty ritual. It's a pact of remembrance. It marks you as one who knows what most were never meant to hear. And it tells the keeper that you see the silence for what it truly is. Share this video if you dare, but know that every view, every whisper of St. Mary's name, every sleepless night spent staring into the dark, it is an offering. And it brings you closer to the truth most men fear. The darkness does not sleep. It waits, and it remembers every name spoken in its shadow. You've been shown what was meant to stay buried. You've heard the bell. You've felt the silence. Now you are part of this darkness, and it is part of you. Subscribe for more secrets they tried to hide. Share this with those you trust. But remember, some stories do not want to be told, and some silences should never be broken.